Hey, what's up everybody? Matt from Rocky's War Room, and today I have not Stonehenge, but Lonehenge. It's a part one of a build that I'm doing for my fantasy miniatures. I'm calling it Lonehenge because I don't know what else to call it, and it kind of looks like Stonehenge. And it's got these 3D printed ladies and this kind of cauldron or thing in the middle there that represents some sort of sacrificial spot or something along those lines, something to fight over in a scenario. So what I started with was a piece of EPVC, and as you can see that I beveled the edges, and I just made a random cutout here on the, just a random cutout here, and it worked out. And then I tapered off the edges and on the sides and grabbed a piece of sanding brick that I have, and sanded it all off to make it smooth and to give it a beveled edge so it sits on the table nicely. It'll have a nice edge. Just take, different grades of sandpaper. I believe I used a fine grit at the end of it, and I sanded the whole entire surface. Next thing I did, grabbed a bunch of blocks of pink foam. I cut out random sizes. There was no measuring here. I didn't want anything to be completely perfect and symmetrical or exact because, they're going to be stone blocks. So, so I cut out a bunch of random pieces, and they're about 2 inches. Some of them are 1 inch. Just kind of did some random knife cutting. I did not use a foam cutter, which I probably should have, but I wanted to keep the randomness of the pillars and the Stonehenge look. So I did all this by hand instead. So I just took a knife. You can use an X-Acto knife. I used a straight blade because I think it breaks up the stone a little bit better, especially on the corners. You don't want square blocks. You just want to take chunks out of it and just leave it because it just leaves a more natural look. Just taking chips away from the blocks, and I'm cutting towards my thumb, and I should not do that. So please do not do that. Always cut away from yourself if you can. And just keep chipping away at them as much as you can to where it kind of looks like it's been cut stone, but it's been weathered and worn and stuff like that. And you just take chunks out of it. And I find that using a straight blade or some sort of, you could use a steak knife for this, or just some sort of straight blade and just take chunks out the center as well. So it worked out, and do it for all of these pieces. I think I got maybe 15 pieces. I don't know, something along those lines. So after I did all the cutting out of the stone bricks, I wanted to make it look like stone. So I go to the easiest thing to make it look like stone, to make it look like stone, and that's a big ball of foam, or I'm sorry, not a foam. You got a big thing of foam, but of aluminum foil. You got a big ball of aluminum foil, and you just press fairly hard to whatever you're liking to make an impression of the look of rock. And that's the easiest way that I have found, watching tons of YouTube tutorials on how to make terrain and stone and things like that. But this is the quickest way to make it look like stone and give it a rough edge. And, apply as little or as much pressure as you want on these, because I believe that the harder the pressure, it knocks off the little bitty stuff and puts a deeper impression in the rock. It makes it look more realistic in my eyes. And as you can see, I'm chipping away little bitty specks as I roll it across. And I'm not holding back. I'm really pressing it in there, getting all the corners, all the edges, around the top, around the side, because I'm not sure where I'm going to be gluing this to. And as you can see, it gives it a rock texture as if it's been weathered. And it's the super simple, easy way of doing it. Thank you, Black Magic Craft. That's where I learned that from, was the aluminum foil. So after that was done, I did it to a few. I started laying it out. Like I said, I have no plan whatsoever. I got inside the ridges too with the aluminum foil. I didn't want to mention that. You really want to press into the inside of those ridges so they're not flat. You want to cover roll that aluminum foil on every inch of it, including the parts that go inside, are the parts that you've cut inside. So for this project, I used hot glue and put it on the surface here. I kind of laid it out first before I actually pinned it down. You always want to at least kind of get an idea as best you can on how you want to do it. So I'm kind of just laying it out. I wanted this to be a big broken pillar on top of the other pillar. And I test it out, and I've got it figured out. So we'll get some adequate spacing so you can fit a model through there. That's another important thing. You got to make it playable. And I just used hot glue to put this all together. It works well. It keeps it there, and it dries quickly. So you can just press and go. And make sure you put some pressure on it and hold it there for, 10 seconds or so. So it'll lay as flat and stick as flat as possible and not leave any gaps. But just, continue to use your hot glue and lay it out any way you want to, really. You don't have to do it the way I did. I could have just done all pillars is what I was originally going to do, but I thought, you know what? Let's make something that looks like Stonehenge, but it's not Stonehenge. And that's where we get the Lonehenge from. So continue to hot glue your pieces on. And like I said, I completely did this off the cuff, without a plan, without a drawn up plan. And it's just so easy to do. And this is, just the first part of it. So yeah, I think that looks good so far. And moving on to the next step. So I had this 3D printed piece. It looks like stone. And it's the three ladies. And I was sitting and looking at it on the shelf, and I said, you know what, this would look pretty awesome on this piece. So, but the back of it had a flat side. So I wanted to add another stone in the back of it, cut off to where you can see the ladies from the back. And I didn't want to make it too tall to where I'd have to, paint inside there. Or paint coming from the other direction and it looking odd. So I cut the pillar off there and hot glued not only the 3D printed model, but that stone behind it, so I can kind of hide the flat surface and kind of give it a three-dimensional type thing on the back instead of just the flat surface on the back, and make it look kind of funny from the other direction. So you always got to think about those type of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to lay stones all the way around. So I prepped a couple more big stones and laid them out here to figure out that looks good. I'm going to glue it. Like I said, this is completely random. This was not planned out. So I was like, yep, that looks good. I made my decision pretty quickly when it came to where I was going to put things. And I just said, you know what, we're just going to do this. And a lot of people get stuck on, well, let's do the plan, let's think this out, which is usually good. But honestly, I wanted just something cool that I came up with just completely random. So I had these pieces from Value Gear. They're part of the sci-fi range that Value Gear does. They're resin bases and little things that you can add to your miniatures and your miniature terrain. But I thought these looked great as for kind of like an altar. So I was just looking around my hobby room, and I was like, oh, this would be a great altar. So I went ahead and sanded it and roughed them up, just to rough them up a little bit. And it just goes to show you how you can multi-purpose stuff from science fiction to make it look like fantasy. There's things you have sitting, just laying around. Just look around your room. There is something around that you have grabbed over the years you have not used for anything, and you're just like, you know what, let's do this. So I got this big base here that I'm going to glue in front of the three ladies. And like I said, this was completely random. I did not know what I was going to do beforehand. So this actually was pretty awesome how it organically came about. But I was going to super glue it, but I was like, no, hot glue will work good enough. It'll keep it there. And it'll be pretty sturdy. It's not like we're going to be throwing this, piece of terrain around the room. And it'll stay. So, and it's resin. They're real nice. But go check out Value Gear. They got a lot of stuff for World War II, 135th scale, 148th scale. That really great stuff like crates and things like that, which I'm going to be using a few crates on this terrain piece. That they're World War II crates, but they work great for fantasy as well. And we'll see that in part 2. So now I got the altar set up, and I wasn't happy with just that. I said, you know what, let's add little bitty stone bricks around here to kind of make it look a little bit more, you know, fantasy and, you know, medieval kind of sort of. So I cut out these little bitty bricks, just eyeballing them, totally eyeballing them off what I had left over of the pink foam, and just cut them at random. I rolled them as best I could when I cut them in the bricks in strips first, little 2-inch strips, 3-inch strips. I rolled them with aluminum foil and then cut them into these bricks. Now there is a much easier way. You can use a foam cutter and it would cut them a lot straighter, but I wanted them to be kind of Mod Podge, you know, different looking stones that are going around that are just as ancient as the ones that it's surrounding. You know, so really weathered stuff. And this is the tedious part of the build, is laying these bricks out, especially when you're using hot glue. It just gets everywhere, and it leaves little strings and stuff like that. But I just randomly laid them out in a pattern around the altar that I'm building, and it's looking great. And I just keep layering it up. And one thing too to remember is after you have all your bricks laid down, you can run the aluminum foil ball over the top of all the bricks once they're set down. And I'm going to continue all this all the way around here. So here is, I got about halfway. I went all the way into the center, covered that, or to the left side, covered that up. And I'm just going to continue to lay my small bricks. And one thing I can say about this process is of laying the bricks, you have very little time. So make sure you have enough bricks cut. You have very little time for that hot glue to set up and dry. So that's why I'm doing a little bit at a time with the hot glue, obviously, laying out a small line. And I ran out of bricks on one part and was like, oh no, I got hot glue there. Don't fret. Don't be upset about it. You know, you can cut the hot glue once it's dry off the part and make a smoother surface. Make a smoother surface to lay your other bricks down. So don't worry if that does happen. If you run out of bricks, you don't realize it like I did, and you can just cut that right off the surface once it's completely dry, and have a flat surface to lay your bricks down that you cut next. So I'm just continuing around. Like I said, it was totally random. I was going to only do 2 layers of bricks like this, and I went ahead and wanted to bring it around the back of the statue as well. So I'm going to be doing that, bringing it around the back of the statue, and I did a 3rd layer of bricks. So as you can see here, I got the 3rd layer of bricks down, and the steps, I made some kind of some small steps, and it's all dry. And I'm going to take my ball of aluminum foil, and I'm just going to run it over all of these bricks to kind of give it that stone feature like we did for the pillars. They're really small, so when you're cutting them off the foam, it's really tough to roll this aluminum foil across it. You could also put it in a can. You can put all your bricks in a can with rocks and shake it up with the rocks to weather it, but this worked just as well. So the last thing I did is I hot glued this metal piece I had extra left over from a vehicle kit for a Humvee that was kind of a cap that went inside. If you turn it upside down, it's got great texture, and it looks like a little cauldron or something along those lines. So I used matte Mod Podge instead of using Elmer's or any of the, like Elmer's or some sort of primer over the top of these bricks and stuff like that with a paintbrush. So it would be easy to paint, and not only that, it'll seal it up and make them more rigid and prevent, it'll be a harder surface, and it'll prevent, you know, bumps and things like that on the rocks itself during playtime, during, you know, games and things like that. Not only that, it just made it more rigid and tougher. Kind of seals it in too and helps with the paint job. Gives it a nice surface to paint to and stick to. So that's why I used Mod Podge. So this is all finished for now, after I've applied Mod Podge over all the pink foam, including the bricks with the cauldron on it. I'm very happy with the organic way it came out. So I'm calling this finished for now. I got to let the Mod Podge dry for 24 hours and then join me for part 2, where we will paint this terrain piece to completion and adding rocks and gravel and things like that. So ta-ta!